Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Sebastian stumbled into the house, every step weighed down by sheer exhaustion. His body ached with the toll of another grueling day, his muscles burning and his hands calloused from endless labor. The relentless demands of his job as a construction project manager didn't stop at the mental gymnastics of problem solving. More often than not, he found himself physically immersed in the work, hammer in hand, tackling tasks that pushed his body to its limits. Home was his sanctuary, the one place where he could finally exhale. But tonight, that sense of safety was disrupted. A suitcase sat by the door, its stark presence striking an odd, intrusive note. Sebastian froze, a sense of unease tightening in his chest as his gaze scanned the room and landed on Madison. She was perched on the couch, her posture unnaturally stiff. Her face was fixed in a forced brightness that clashed with the tension hanging in the air. "Don't worry," she said, her voice unnervingly chipper. "I'm not leaving you." The words, meant to reassure, only deepened Sebastian's apprehension. He blinked, momentarily stunned, his thoughts tangled. Years of navigating tense work situations taught him the value of listening before reacting, and his instincts told him this was a moment to stay silent. He set his keys down on the side table, feeling the weight of the situation pressing in. Madison suddenly stood, her movements sharp and awkward. Her smile stretched wider, but it only made her look more anxious. "This is going to sound bad at first," she began, her voice quivering as though she was trying to inject it with excitement. Sebastian's eyes drifted back to the suitcase, a sinking feeling solidifying in his gut. "What's going on?" he asked quietly, his voice raw and strained. Taking a deep breath, Madison steeled herself. "I'm going away for a week," she said with a peculiar mix of cheer and tension. "With Matthew." The words slammed into Sebastian like a physical blow. The room seemed to tilt, and he stood motionless, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. "Matthew?" he finally managed to say, his voice hollow. The name was bitterly familiar. Matthew, her boss, a man whose arrogance and smug superiority were impossible to ignore. That Matthew. "You're going with Matthew?" The question escaped him, though it wasn't really a question. It was a grim acknowledgement of what she'd revealed. Madison pressed forward, her voice a mixture of guilt and breathless excitement. "I know how it sounds, but it's not what you think. I've been seeing him for a while, but that's not the point." She took a step closer, her eyes wide, almost alight with a strange enthusiasm. "Matthew is just persuasive. You know how he is. When he wants something, he gets it. And he wanted me." Her laugh was quiet, unnerving. It sent a cold wave of dread through Sebastian. "He wanted me," she repeated, her voice carrying an unsettling reverence, as though Matthew's desire for her was some extraordinary validation. Sebastian stood frozen, his thoughts a chaotic jumble. She spoke about Matthew like he was some unstoppable force, as if his interest in her was an inevitability she couldn't resist. There was even pride in her voice, or was that just his imagination? It all felt unreal, like a nightmare he couldn't escape. "But that's why I'm telling you now," Madison continued, her tone softening, her expression now earnest. "I couldn't keep it a secret anymore. It feels so good to finally say it, and I didn't want to lie about the trip." She gestured toward the suitcase, as if it justified everything. "Matthew thinks it's important for us to have this time together. Just the two of us. No hiding." Sebastian tried to respond, but his voice failed him. The words wouldn't come. His emotions churned violently, every one of her sentences cutting deeper. The casualness with which she spoke about her betrayal, the gleam of excitement in her eyes, it was incomprehensible. "Don't worry," Madison added quickly, her tone brightening like she was offering a solution to a minor inconvenience. "It's only a week. After that, everything will go back to normal. I'll come back to you. I love you, Sebastian. This doesn't have to change anything." She waved her hand dismissively, as if waving away the enormity of what she'd just admitted. "This is just a Hiccup. Matthew wanted me, so now we'll have this time together. And when it's over, we'll focus on us again, on building our future. Sebastian felt like the air had been sucked from his lungs. Each word she spoke seemed to erode the foundation of their life together. The reverence in her voice when she spoke about Matthew, the way she minimized her actions, it was all too much. She wasn't just confessing, she was justifying, almost celebrating her infidelity, as though it were some fleeting indulgence with no lasting consequences. "I know this might be hard to hear," she said gently, her voice softening again. "But you've always been so understanding, Sebastian." Her words echoed in his mind, a cruel twist of the knife. She had shattered the trust between them, yet she spoke as though his forgiveness was inevitable. Sebastian's heart pounded in his chest, a deafening roar drowning out everything else as he stood there, unable to comprehend the person standing before him. "One of the things I've always appreciated about you is your steadiness. You never overreact, which is why I trust we'll get through this," Madison said gently, stepping closer with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "Matthew and I talked about it." She extended the paper toward him. "We thought it might help if we outlined a few things for you," she added. Sebastian's gaze dropped to her outstretched hand, his expression unreadable, his mind struggling to process. Madison waited, holding the paper with an unwavering yet slightly trembling hand. "It's nothing complicated," she continued. "Just a few suggestions to keep everything running smoothly while I'm gone." With visible hesitation, Sebastian reached out, his fingers brushing against the paper before taking it. Slowly, he unfolded it, the slight quiver in his hands betraying the turmoil inside. His eyes scanned the contents, each line delivering a blow heavier than the last. "No arguments before or after the trip. Peace must remain our priority. Do not discuss the trip with anyone. No social media posts referencing the trip. No talk of separation or divorce. This is only temporary. Do not ask questions about the trip once it's over. Stay calm and wait at home. When I return, we'll move forward together." Sebastian's chest tightened as he read, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. No arguments, no explanations, no separation. The sheer audacity of the words left him staggered. Their confidence, their presumption, it was as insulting as it was outrageous. Madison broke the silence, her voice calm, almost soothing. "See? It's all pretty straightforward," she said, as if explaining something entirely reasonable. "Matthew really respects you," she added with a soft smile. "He believes you'll approach this with maturity. I know it's not easy, but it's just 1 week. After that, everything will go back to normal. You're not the jealous type, Sebastian. You're logical. You're steady." Her gaze sought his, her expression full of quiet conviction. She truly believed he'd comply without resistance. She didn't even entertain the idea that he might rebel. Divorce wasn't in her vocabulary. She saw it as a non-option, an impossibility. Sebastian's hands balled into fists, the paper crumpling in his grip. Words swirled in his mind, sharp and urgent, but none of them reached his lips. He wanted to protest, to shout, to make her understand the depth of his fury, but his voice wouldn't come. Madison mistook his silence for agreement. A flicker of relief softened her face. "I knew you'd understand," she said, her tone almost affectionate. "I was worried, but you've always been so supportive. You always give me what I need." Leaning in, she placed a soft kiss on his cheek before stepping back. "I'll be back next Friday afternoon," she said brightly, picking up her suitcase. "Then we can move forward, start planning for a family, like we've talked about." She gave him a warm, cheerful smile as she opened the door. "We'll be fine, Sebastian. You'll see." With that, she was gone. Sebastian stood frozen in the now empty room, the crumpled paper still clenched in his fist. A list of rules, as if his emotions could be managed like a set of instructions, as though their betrayal was just another inconvenience he needed to endure with quiet dignity. For a moment, he remained rooted in place, the weight of the situation pinning him down. Then, something shifted within him. A spark flared, igniting into a fierce, unyielding anger. It wasn't sadness or confusion that consumed him now. It was raw, burning rage. Sebastian was no stranger to problems. He had always been resourceful, able to adapt and find solutions when the need arose. This situation was no different. It wasn't a defeat, it was a challenge, and challenges demanded strategy. His gaze fell to the crumpled list in his hand. The arrogance behind it was almost comical. Did they truly believe he'd adhere to their conditions? Did they think he was so spineless as to simply accept this? Madison and Matthew seemed to believe they had everything under control. They envisioned a scenario where this week would pass quietly, leaving no ripples in their lives. They had underestimated him, severely. A slow, cold smirk spread across Sebastian's face as his thoughts crystallized. The list wasn't just a set of restrictions. It was a roadmap to their vulnerabilities. It revealed exactly what they feared, what they hoped to avoid, and where they thought they held the upper hand. This wasn't a surrender. It was an opportunity. Sebastian's grin widened, sharp and resolute. They had their plan, their neatly outlined rules, but now he had a plan of his own, one they'd never see coming. This wasn't over, not even close, and when he acted, they would finally understand just how far they'd underestimated him. For the first time since Madison had handed him that list, Sebastian felt something he hadn't expected: control. Sebastian's mind was razor-sharp, tuned to the urgency of the moment. He wasn't one to scream or smash things in a fit of rage. His anger was far colder, a controlled, deliberate force. Over the years, he had earned a reputation for tackling challenges with precision, and now, faced with the deepest betrayal of his life, he was prepared to approach it with the same unyielding resolve. To dismantle anything overwhelming, you break it into pieces. This was a principle Sebastian had mastered. The scribbled list left behind was a mockery, shallow, poorly thought out, and woefully insufficient. It didn't even graze the surface of what needed to be addressed. With steely determination, he strode into the kitchen, tossed the inadequate list onto the table, pulled open a drawer, and grabbed a notebook and pen. If there was going to be a real plan, it would be his creation. As he began writing, his mind churned with relentless efficiency. This was his forte: problem-solving, always staying ahead of the curve. This particular situation, cleaning up the wreckage left by his unfaithful wife and her deceitful partner, would be no exception. Sebastian's approach would be meticulous and unrelenting. The new list would not aim to appease. It would be uncompromising and exact, restrict financial access. Sebastian held control over their shared accounts. He wasn't driven by spite, but there would be no charity. All joint accounts, shared payments, and mutual finances would be terminated. Her personal funds would remain untouched, but anything tied to him was off limits. Change the locks. When she returned, her key would no longer work. This house was no longer hers to claim. She had chosen her path. Matthew could provide her a roof. Nothing familiar would welcome her back. Sell the house. The home, a repository of bittersweet memories, was no longer worth keeping. It would be listed, and its emotional ties severed. By the time she came back, the property would no longer belong to Sebastian. Pack her belongings. Every trace of Madison, her clothing, trinkets, photos, would be carefully boxed and sent to storage. He wouldn't destroy or discard her things. Everything would be preserved, waiting for her retrieval, but it would no longer linger in his space. Even shared furniture would leave with her. Compile evidence. Madison had taken her phone, but Sebastian still controlled her digital accounts. Restoring a cloud backup would expose her messages, emails, and photos. She could deal with losing access later. He needed the truth now. Seek legal counsel. Divorce was no longer a question. It was an inevitability. Sebastian would hire the sharpest attorney and ensure the process was as swift as it was decisive. Speak with Matthew's wife. Madison and Matthew likely assumed Sebastian would remain silent to avoid drama. They were wrong. He intended to share the truth with Matthew's wife, letting her see the reality they'd tried to conceal. Look ahead. This wasn't Sebastian's ending, merely the end of Madison's chapter in his story. He would rebuild his life, free from betrayal. His focus would be on action, not bitterness. Once the list was finished, Sebastian leaned back, the pen tapping against the table in a rhythmic beat. The act of creating the plan had brought him clarity, a sense of control. There would be no begging, no futile attempts to salvage what was irreparably broken. He would move forward, crafting his life on his own terms. By the time Madison returned, the world she had known would be unrecognizable. The house, stripped of all shared possessions, bore testament to his determination. Every piece of her presence, clothes, mementos, and photographs, had been boxed up and split into storage units marked his and hers. Sebastian's friends had come to help with the clearing, working without questions or comments. They simply acted, fueled by pizza and beer, their quiet support evident. Physical labor had always been a comfort to Sebastian, and the exhaustion it brought was a welcome relief. Yet beneath the surface, emotions brewed, waves of betrayal, anger, and heartbreak threatening to crash. But he held firm. There would be time to process the pain later. Now was a time for calculated action. Sebastian stood in the center of the hollowed-out house, taking one last look. It felt foreign, stripped bare of meaning, the air heavy with emptiness. Everything that had tethered him to this place was gone, erased as though it had never been. He wouldn't be back, and as he turned to leave, one thing was certain. He had made the right decision. Everything was tarnished beyond repair. And then there was the title of ownership, an irony so sharp it almost felt poetic. It was his house, not theirs. The house where Madison had spent years building memories but never truly claimed as her own. Her name was never added to the deed, a detail that seemed almost deliberate in hindsight. Sebastian let out a dry, mirthless laugh. She likely never questioned it, believing they were unshakable, that the house symbolized their enduring future. How wrong she had been. His lawyer, swift and meticulous, had drawn up the divorce papers with surgical precision. No prolonged arguments, no dramatic confrontations. Sebastian had no appetite for theatrics. The papers were ready to be served the moment she walked through the door, if she ever returned. He no longer cared. Whether she came back to the house, now listed for sale, or stayed with Matthew, it was irrelevant to him. His attention had shifted, his focus narrowing to something else entirely. Madison's phone. She had taken it with her when she left with Matthew, naturally, but Sebastian knew her habits all too well. Madison had always been careless with her passwords, trusting Sebastian implicitly. And why wouldn't she? He had been steadfast, the unyielding foundation she had never imagined would betray her. Sitting at the kitchen table, his jaw tightened as he held the phone, a replica of hers, restored to its exact state. It wasn't a duplicate in the traditional sense. With methodical precision, he had deactivated her service remotely, replaced the physical device, and restored it using her cloud backups. It had been insultingly easy, and in that digital trove he found everything he needed. The messages between Madison and Matthew weren't just evidence of infidelity, they were an unrelenting assault on his dignity. Matthew had the audacity to call him irrelevant. "He's too nice, he'll just let it slide," one message sneered. Sebastian could almost hear the smugness dripping from the text. But Madison's replies were the true dagger. "It's fine. He won't make a fuss. He never does." Sebastian's stomach churned as he read her words over and over, each repetition stoking a growing fire within him. This was how she saw him, not as a partner, not as someone deserving of respect, but as a doormat. The final insult came in the form of photos, intimate, degrading images of her and Matthew exchanged with casual glee. Matthew even gloated in an email, dripping with smugness about their exploits. Cold fury simmered in Sebastian as he catalogued their arrogance, their callous disregard. Sebastian didn't stop at uncovering the truth. He turned it into an ironclad case, the damning texts, the photos, the incriminating emails, all organized into a meticulous dossier. Copies were sent to his lawyer, to Matthew's wife, and to the board of directors at Matthew's company. A sanitized version, scrubbed of anything too explicit, was posted online. The world, Sebastian decided, had a right to see the truth. Matthew's wife received a carefully worded email, accompanied by all the sordid evidence. Sebastian wasn't purely seeking revenge. He believed she deserved to know, just as he had. Her stunned silence on the phone when he reached out lingered in his mind, but he dismissed it. He had done what was right. What she chose to do with the information was her decision. Meanwhile, Sebastian's plans crystallized. Madison and Matthew thought they could walk away unscathed, but they had underestimated him. He would ensure the consequences of their betrayal followed them wherever they went. The idyllic life Madison might have dreamed of returning to was gone, as hollow as Matthew's arrogance. Madison, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing, basked in her newfound romance. Matthew had gone all out: first-class tickets to Italy, a luxurious suite, opulent dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. She felt adored, swept up in a fantasy. That first night was perfect. Champagne waited in their room, and they reveled in each other's company, the city's lights twinkling through the window. But by the second day, the illusion began to crack. Matthew's charm morphed into something colder, more detached. His remarks grew curt, his smiles faded into perfunctory gestures. At dinner, Madison laughed at one of his jokes, only to be met with a distant, disdainful look, the kind he usually reserved for people he deemed insignificant. She tried to dismiss it, attributing it to stress or fatigue, but an uncomfortable knot settled in her chest. Back in their suite, her phone lay untouched on the nightstand. She hadn't attempted to contact Sebastian, assuming he wouldn't want to hear from her while she was with Matthew. Yet a small part of her felt a sting of resentment at his silence. Why hadn't he reached out, even once? Matthew demanded Madison's undivided attention whenever they were together, leaving no room for her thoughts to wander. The next day, he whisked her away on a whirlwind tour of high-end designer boutiques, places she had only dreamed of but never dared to enter. Matthew moved through this world of luxury with effortless ease, as if it was second nature to him. That evening, he bought her an elegant dress, perfect for the upscale dinner they had planned. For a brief moment, Madison felt as if she had stepped into a fairy tale. It was as though they were living a glamorous, secret life removed from reality. But as the evening wore on, the illusion began to crack. Matthew grew increasingly distant, barely engaging with her during dinner. His focus was glued to his phone, and he responded to her attempts at conversation with disinterested nods. The waitstaff treated him like a VIP, but Madison felt invisible, as though she were fading into the background. She wasn't a partner, she was a mere accessory. Later that night, Matthew fell asleep without a word, turning his back to her without hesitation. Left awake and restless, Madison reached for her phone. Her emotions swirled, a mix of guilt, regret, and longing. Sebastian, the man she had left behind, had not called or messaged her even once. She couldn't decide if his silence brought her relief or if it deepened her sense of loss. By the fourth day, Matthew's initial enthusiasm for her had all but disappeared. His interest was now limited to the bedroom. During the day, he paraded her around at lunches, introducing her to his colleagues like a trophy rather than a person. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Matthew had never truly cared for her. She was nothing more than a fleeting distraction to him, a pretty face to show off. Outside of public appearances and superficial conversations, he hardly acknowledged her. In private, he either used her or ignored her entirely. The breaking point came that evening when Matthew invited two other women into their hotel room without warning. Madison was stunned, her shock palpable, but Matthew didn't so much as glance at her reaction. "If you're not joining us, you can sleep on the couch," he said coldly. The weight of her situation crashed down on her like a tidal wave. That night she curled up on the hotel couch, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She replayed the events of the past few days, trying to pinpoint the moment everything had gone wrong. When Matthew had pursued her, she had believed she was special to him. Now, she felt reduced to a mere prop in his self-centered narrative. The next morning, Madison mustered the courage to confront him. She wanted answers, some semblance of closure, but Matthew brushed her off with casual indifference. "Don't make this a big deal, Madison. This trip was just for fun," he said dismissively, his tone devoid of emotion. Her spirit crumbled. The thrill, the allure, the fantasy. It had all turned hollow. She missed Sebastian, the man who made her feel valued, the man who had always centered her in his life. With Matthew, she felt disposable, a fleeting addition to his world. By the sixth day, any remnants of the illusion had vanished. Matthew didn't care for her, not as a person. To him, she was nothing more than an object to display. The realization left her feeling foolish, forever believing the trip could have been magical or meaningful. On their last evening, Madison instinctively reached for her phone, desperate for a connection to Sebastian. But as she unlocked the screen, a pang of dread hit her. The battery was fully charged, yet there were no messages, no missed calls. Sebastian hadn't reached out at all. She had assumed he would wait for her, forgive her absence, and welcome her back without question. Now, she wasn't so sure. She tried calling Sebastian from the hotel's landline, but the call wouldn't go through. Frustration and fear bubbled inside her. Had she pushed him too far this time? The thought haunted her during the flight home. The luxury she had once found intoxicating now felt oppressive, a shallow veneer masking an empty, demeaning experience. All she wanted was to go back to the life she had left behind. Staring out the airplane window as the city came into view, Madison's chest tightened with regret. She had been seduced by a fantasy that had ultimately left her feeling discarded and cheap. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she thought of Sebastian, the man who had always made her feel cherished. She longed to throw herself into his arms, to apologize and beg for a second chance. He had forgiven her before. Surely he would again. When she finally arrived home and pulled into the driveway, her heart raced with a mix of hope and fear. The past week had been a harsh lesson, a painful reminder of what truly mattered. Matthew was not the man she had imagined. The past 7 days felt like a hazy, regrettable nightmare. All that mattered now was Sebastian. Determined, Madison stepped out of the car, resolved to lay bare her soul. She would confess everything, apologize, and promise to rebuild their relationship. Together, they could start anew. She had to believe it wasn't too late. As she stepped out of the car, her gaze immediately locked onto a large, unmistakable "For Sale" sign staked into the front yard. A jolt of nausea swept through her stomach. For sale? That couldn't be right. Sebastian hadn't mentioned a single word about selling the house. Why would he do something like this? They had plans. Shaky ones, sure, but still salvageable. This had to be a mistake. Her fingers trembled slightly as she rummaged through her bag in search of her keys. Sliding the key into the lock, she twisted it, but the mechanism refused to budge. Confused, she tried again, but the lock stayed firmly in place. She jiggled the key, pulled it out, and reinserted it. Still nothing. What was going on? "Sebastian?" she called, knocking harder than she intended. Anxiety tinged her voice. "Sebastian, it's me. Are you there?" Her words echoed faintly through the door, but no response came. Her chest tightened as she peered through the window, pressing her face against the cool glass. Inside, the house was empty. No furniture, no photos, no signs of the life they had built together. "Sebastian," she whispered, the word heavy with dread. This wasn't some misunderstanding. Something was horribly wrong. Her hands fumbled for her phone as she tried to call him. The screen illuminated briefly before an error message appeared. No service. A wave of unease coursed through her. She checked the settings, but it was as if her phone had been completely disconnected. She dialed her parents, but the same message flashed back at her. No service. No way to reach anyone. Her hands shook as she climbed back into the car and started the engine. Sebastian had to have an explanation. He had to. There had to be some logical reason for this. The drive to her parents' house blurred, her mind spinning with scenarios. Maybe there had been a mix-up. Maybe Sebastian was at work and hadn't had a chance to tell her something. Maybe. She barely managed to park the car before rushing to the front door. Her mother opened it before she even knocked, her face clouded with concern. "Madison," her mother said, her voice strained. "Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you." "My phone isn't working," Madison stammered, her words tumbling out in panic. "I can't call anyone. Sebastian changed the locks and the house is empty. Mom, what's going on?" Her mother exhaled deeply, her expression tight with unease. "Come inside. We need to talk." "I don't want to sit down." Madison's voice cracked as she fought the rising panic. "I want answers. Why can't I reach Sebastian? Why is the house for sale?" Her father stepped into the room, his face drawn with sorrow. "Sebastian's gone, Madison," he said quietly. "He's left. The house is being sold, and your things have been moved to storage." The words hit her like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Her mind scrambled to process what she'd just heard. Sebastian? Gone? Selling the house? And he hadn't told her anything? "What do you mean he's gone?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, her chest tightening with each word. "He wouldn't just leave me. He loves me." Her parents exchanged a look heavy with unspoken pain. Her mother sat beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Madison," she said gently, "he's not coming back. Sebastian called us a few days ago. He said you left with someone else, that it was over. He's filed for divorce." The world seemed to tilt under her feet. Divorce? No, that wasn't possible. Sebastian loved her. They had their issues, but they could always work through them, couldn't they? "He said it's over?" The words came out as a choked whisper, her voice frail. Her father gave a solemn nod. "He said you made your choice when you left with that man. This is his choice now." Madison sat frozen, her mind refusing to accept the truth. She had always believed Sebastian would wait for her, faithful, forgiving, her anchor no matter what. Now, for the first time, she realized he was truly gone. It was all because of her. Pressing her palms against her face, tears streamed relentlessly down her cheeks, scalding and unstoppable. "This isn't what I wanted," she choked out, her voice trembling under the weight of her sorrow. "I never wanted this to happen. He wasn't supposed to leave." Her mother's voice pierced the silence, steady but tinged with a quiet reproach. "Did you honestly believe Sebastian would simply forgive you?" she asked, her tone gentle yet cutting. "Madison, you broke his trust. How could you do that to someone who believed in you?" The words struck like a hammer, and Madison's sobs grew more intense. Shaking her head, she found herself caught in a maelstrom of emotions: shock, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Sebastian had been her foundation, the rock that held her steady, but she had treated his love as unyielding, assuming it would withstand anything. She had foolishly played with fire, deluding herself into thinking she wouldn't suffer the consequences. Now, she was left with nothing but the ashes of a life she had torn apart. "Have you even tried contacting him?" her father asked, his voice low and tentative. Madison nodded, her hands trembling as they hid her tear-streaked face. "I've tried," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I think he's changed his number. I can't reach him. I can't even find him." Her mother's expression remained impassive, though her solemn nod spoke volumes. "It's over, Madison. He's cut ties with all of us, not just you." Springing to her feet, Madison began pacing the room with frantic energy. "No, this can't be happening," she muttered, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "I have to find him. I have to make him see. He'll understand. He has to." Yet even as she said it, the truth began to settle over her like a suffocating weight. Sebastian was gone, completely and irreversibly gone. No apology, no plea, no grand gesture could undo what had been done. She collapsed back into her chair, her hands trembling uncontrollably. "I never thought it would end like this," she whispered into the emptiness. "I never believed." But deep down, she had always known. She had allowed herself to be captivated by Matthew's charisma, convincing herself it was something Sebastian could move past. She deluded herself into thinking Sebastian would wait, that his love would outlast her mistakes. Recklessly, she had wagered everything, believing she was invincible to the pain of loss. Now, the brutal truth was undeniable. She had gambled it all and lost. Her phone lay silent and still on the coffee table, a cold reminder of the void that now consumed her life. Everything she had cherished, the home, her husband, and the life she had once envisioned, had evaporated like a fleeting dream. The desolation was unbearable. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.